Hey folks, before we begin the show today, just a quick note. We ended up recording this podcast conversation in 2 sessions, and Sarah was unable to join us for the second session. So if you feel like Sarah disappeared for a while and then returns, well, she did, but we just wanted you to know why. Welcome to the CEO's Heart for Service, where leaders of exceptional B2B businesses work together to answer this question. How do you scale your services without compromising your client experience or the core values that drive them? I'm your host, Matt Wolf. Join us as B2B leaders share hard-won insights and field-tested strategies for the tightrope walk between integrity and growth. We'll find our balance and the way forward together. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the CEO's Heart for Service. We have a great interview today with Anna Halaburda, who is the founder of Be Ready Exit Solutions. We just got off of the interview with her. And Sarah, there were definitely things I heard that I did not expect.
Yes, I think one of the things that listeners will be most surprised by is that business exit planning is inherently emotional, right? These business owners are taking their babies, what they have invested years, the blood, sweat, tears, so much into their business, and then they are getting ready to exit. And that is an emotional process. And I think, Matt, what we learned from Anna is that because of that, her approach to scaling her business and her heart for service, it wasn't one without the other, right? She had these strategies from day one about how to scale her business with that heart for service. They were completely intertwined.
Yeah, we don't hear that very often, that people have been thinking about these things in advance, anticipating those issues and getting ahead of them. So really interesting. And the emotional thing, I don't think that sounds surprising when you hear it. Of course, it's an emotional experience and it's tied to all of that. But it's another thing for it to be acknowledged, right? And to be really considered as part of the planning process. So
Yes.
she is clearly delivering the service in a unique way that I think people will really find interesting. Something else you might find interesting is that I just forgot to introduce you when we did this. I'm with Sarah Patisal today. Sarah is one of our amazing brand strategists and copywriters, and just has a brilliant, insightful mind into the structure and the power of story. And I'm glad you're here today, Sarah.
Matt, I take it as a compliment that you figured our listeners would already know who I am, and they should. So thank you.
Darn tootin'. All right. Well, let's hop on over, and we're going to share our conversation with Anna Halaburda. Hi, Anna. Welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you so very much, and thank you for the invitation. I am pleased to be here. I really am.
You really just followed a logical progression in your life. You've landed in exactly the place where you should have landed. It's clear. Let's talk about that for a second. How do you describe Be Ready Exit Solutions as a business and what you do for people?
So my elevator speech is, we do business exit planning, profitability, and value growth consulting, and transaction support services. And people will usually stop there and go, "What?" And I'll hand them a card and say, "Give me a call." Because really what we do is, for some reason, and I'm still a little unsure why, maybe I'm older than most people other professionals that I deal with, but the term exit planning seems to have this negative connotation, like to a business owner. When a business owner says, "What do you do?" "I do exit planning," and they go, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, I'm not ready to sell just yet."
Oh,
And it's more along the lines of, no, how many hours did you spend doing your business plan when you opened up your business? Hopefully you did at least some of it. And if you're serious, you did many hours of planning. What form of entity are you going to have, and why is that form of entity? How does it work for you? And is the entity just, how you do your business, the bucket that you legally carry your business in? Or is it also a tool to use within running your business? And so when you look at building the exit planning conversation, me landing here, a matter of I took a certification course in business exit planning through now it's the International Exit Planning Association, the IEPA, and I became an integral part of that organization, not in ownership, but I contribute there. I get ideas there. I'm rewriting some of the training modules with a small group. And so I landed up in exit planning. And Matt, you were right. It seemed like that's where I belong because that highlighted that strength that I just naturally had and developed.
It's such a powerful point in people's lives that you enter into with them of not just selling it, but selling it the right way and honoring what that business means to people and how much of their lives they have poured into that. Those are the kind of things we like to explore here because, like I said earlier, we're trying to figure out how do you scale a service-based business without compromising the quality of the service or the values behind it. So I'm curious, I want to dig on that theme now for a while and just think in your growth story over the years, what are the big chapters? What are some moments where you've really hit some bumps in the road and realized, okay, we're growing and we have to figure out this puzzle and it's not going to be easy. How to maintain this level of service, how to take great care of people, but keep expanding.
Well, that was thought out and planned. So it wasn't like all of a sudden I got busy and I now needed to figure out how to scale. I had helped a whole lot of my clients become successful in their businesses, and they did it by listening to the advice that I gave more often than not. When they disagreed with me, we would discuss it. And it was their business after all. Yeah, I'm not going to call them foolish. They can do whatever they want with it. But the business was built from day one to scale.
Mhm.
And what that means is you have to have systems in place, processes in place, just like you would tell a client if you were to go in there and they would say, I'm looking, I hit this plateau. And this is a common theme in business advisory work for business owners where they will max out. They can grow their business from zero, let's say, to 5 million. They just can't get it past that. And sometimes they just don't know what to do next. They don't have enough capital to invest, to hire additional staff, get new equipment, whatever each individual situation is like. So if I'm telling people what to do and I don't do it myself, I shouldn't be consulting. And the term that is thrown around is you got to eat your own cooking. And the way I say it is be ready is my most important client. It comes first all the time. I will spend the time and the money developing things and be ready, system and processes. Now, let me throw a complicating factor in here because from the very beginning, when I worked with Matt Christ, when I first started working with Brand 3, we came up into, what is my business model? Well, I can go out there as an exit planner, and I struggle doing this to get the business owners in the door. And I did seminars and lunch and learns and things like that. Never got a lot of traction. And then I said, well, yeah, you go back to the old story, and I don't know, which bank robber said this is how come you rob the banks? He goes, well, that's where the money is. So where are the clients? Where are the business owner clients that are already identified as needing my services? It's other advisors that don't do what I do. So Be Ready was built as a collaborative business model where we will take individual clients and service them, but we are the business exit planning arm of other advisors who don't have the knowledge or the skill sets, don't want to do it, are restricted by licensure, or there's a few other situations in there. But so we fulfill that function.
So, Anna, we want to spend a little time looking at what is the core theme of this podcast for us. This idea of, when you're someone who cares about delivering great service to people, that becomes a real issue as you try to scale. How do you scale? How do you grow without compromising the quality of your services? And every service is really unique. Yours is really unique. Your approach is unique. And so we want to explore some of the struggles and bumps along the way that you had. So I'm curious where your mind goes first. As you think about your journey, as you've been scaling and growing, where have you seen some of the biggest challenges?
Well, first of all, I spent the first several years just getting down what my messaging was, and Brand 3 certainly helped me with that as I started to grow. And first it was just a general presence on the internet, and then it really started to morph into what are my core values, what are my mission and vision statements, and moving forward, how do I keep my vision for what Be Ready is, or at that time what it could be, when other outside influences were trying to turn Be Ready into what they thought Be Ready should be, into their vision of Be Ready instead of my vision of Be Ready.
Can I poke in on that for a minute? I'm curious where your challenges were with the messaging and where you landed, because I think that will give us some great context to understand then that the new challenge that came up as you were growing.
Well, initially, when I first started this realization and the understanding after going into the business exit planning world as an exit planner, again, my background is a CPA and a CFP and a few other professional designations. So years ago, when I was back in the early 80s, when I got my CFP certificate designation, from the CPA standpoint, I saw that people were using the CFP designation simply to do what they already do, whether they were money managers or CPAs or attorneys, stockbrokers. It was just a new way to cloak themselves in new wording, something that was new, exciting, maybe a little sexier than what they were doing, but they were still doing the same thing. And
Okay.
when the exit planning came out as an actual profession and industry, I saw a lot of that as well. So I did not want to go there. And so, if I can, about 5 or 6 years ago, this is pre-COVID, I had another professional advisor who I've met over the years say, I've got a client, let's collaborate on this client. And as we know, Be Ready was built as a collaborative platform. So we collaborate, and at the time it was I collaborated with other professionals to deliver wins for their clients. And so as I started working with this one lady, she had her own vision of what Be Ready should be and tried to take it back to the inception. And by that time, I had already had my mission vision statement down. I had the first iteration or the second iteration of my website up and running. So she would always come in and say, well, let's figure out what this is. Let's have SOPs in place. And I informed her that I've already built this. This is not something we have to reimagine. This is not a startup company, but we need to now take what have you become knowledgeable in the Be Ready knowledge base, and then we can make alterations, changes, updates that make sense. But I'm not going to go in and rediscover the wheel or,
Yeah.
invent fire again.
So what was that before we move on? What was that mission and vision? Because I don't know if we've quite gotten to that heart behind what you do, that sense of purpose.
Okay, so Be Ready is uniquely placed in the industry not only to be the industry leader in the providing of business exit planning services, but it's also to build a platform for which additional exit planning advisors that are coming up can look to and have be ready as that industry standard, that best in class, so that we're not only delivering wins for their clients, we are developing the industry. We,
You were
you know,
really
like
looking to define and shape this new industry and take the lead.
Absolutely. And part of that is because of my unique background, but it was my perception was unique in the industry, and that I had the ability to, you know, take that 30,000-foot view at the time, number one, and not be driven by, gee, I have to create cash flow today. I'm building something for the future. And so, number one, becoming the industry standard as far as a practice that caters to both business owners and other professional advisors. And that's always to remain true to the vision that this is what other exit planning firms eventually are going to say, oh, we need to incorporate these kinds of standards and this knowledge base if we're going to be best in class.
What is it in the midst of all that, in those standards, in those things you were putting together that really made it unique? Like what made it set apart from the rest of the industry and how you were
Well,
trying to raise the bar?
all right. Well, number one, I wasn't using exit planning as a tool to enhance what I was already doing. If I was a money manager, this wasn't just to get more assets under management. If I was a CPA, this wouldn't just be another enhancement to my client advisory services, or CAS services, as they're called in the accounting profession. But this is the service. These are the services, rather, that we are providing to business owners and to other advisors and their clients, that's strictly built around exit planning, and not using exit planning as a tool to deliver different services, as an introduction to different services.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. So it's easy to set your own vision when you're the one in the company. And obviously, as you've invited people in, then that gets challenged or pushed to get. So, yeah, what happened next then? What was the next challenge that you hit as you were scaling and growing?
Well, as I was scaling and growing, simultaneously, what I was doing is I was building my centers of influence. I was speaking at conferences, getting more visibility, and branding everything under the Be Ready moniker rather than anything else. So, number one, as the Be Ready brand grew, and I ended up being an expert, subject matter expert on exit planning, plus business strategies in general, tax strategies, and everything that business exit planning encompasses, that other professional advisors, senior level advisors who have are already been doing business exit planning as part of their practice, whether you're a CPA or an attorney. And oddly enough, CPA and attorney were the first two folks that were invited under the tent, so to speak. They had their own visions on how they delivered their services. And that was everything from an engagement letter all the way down to how much time do we take in delivering these services, to what's included. So what I like to call it is, what's our inventory? What are we selling? So we couldn't recreate the wheel every time we got a new client. Every client is unique, individual, different, even if they're within the same industry. But our internal processes have to be consistent in order to scale. We can't reinvent the wheel for every new client. So,
Yeah, but that's a lot. I mean, as you explain, when you talk about merging basically their entire process with a whole new process, it's a huge challenge. How did you take that on?
Well, first of all, what I did, and this is still my process when I collaborate with other professionals. If somebody brings a client to me and they say, well, this is my client, I'm taking the lead, but bring your expertise in, I watch and see how they fulfill their obligation, their contractual obligation to their client. And I add what I can along the way. So as I observe and note the way they're providing services, how much time it takes them to do, and that's everything from how much time does it take for them to respond to a client request all the way down to, what kind of engagement letter do we use? And if we have a deadline of next Wednesday, are they staying up on, Monday night and Tuesday night trying to get the work done? What I call hair on fire moments where everything is, becomes critical because we've got a deadline tomorrow and it's not done. So, it was workflow, and I would analyze it and I would come up with, some people think in Word, I think in Excel. And I think I may have said that before, but I would come up with an Excel spreadsheet that was relatively accurate and say, here's the steps we took. Here's the time it took us to do it. Here were the people involved. What we should be making was X, but what we really took, if we wrapped everything together, we're working for minimum wage. We're swapping hours for dollars. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. We are a value deliverer. We deliver value to our clients. We need to have value billing. And the only way you can do value billing is to be, highly aware of what your deliverable is, number one. Number two, how to deliver it. Number three, who's accountable to deliver it on a timely basis, and basic Gantt charts. Step number one is you meet a client, you have coffee with them, all the way down to delivering the final reports, and then either going on to your next engagement with that client, or, if it's transition, then a successful transition and helping out both sides of that team. So when you really start to analyze it, and that's what CPAs do, we filled
Mhm.
out timesheets and I hated them when I was, just coming up in the accounting profession, but it really gave me the, shall I say, the understanding that if you're delivering a value service, you should be able to deliver it in a very efficient manner.
Yeah.
And
And was
other
that success sorry, was that successful then, that approach that you took to
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
so, one advisor in particular, there were actually two advisors on this one engagement where we went through that process, and they started saying, well, how can we change this? Does everybody need to be on every Zoom call or in every meeting? How do we more efficiently capture the information? Now, when I was observing other folks' process, other advisors' processes, everything from, what documents do you get from the client right up front? How do you get them? Where are they deposited? Who has access to them? And when you're alone, that's an easy thing to do. When you're a single shingle, or whether you're a small office and there's one or two people sitting next to each other, that's an easy thing to do because you're there and saying, oh, where's that document? It's over there. But when we're dealing with advisors in different parts of the country, and they have different software, they have different methods, we have to blend that in a way where we do a document request that gets all of the documents right up front, rather than keeping going back to the client or back to the well to get more information. That slows down the process. So every time you have to pick up a paper again and go back into the client, not only does the client get fatigued from, trying to continue to give you things, if they can have that pain point all up front, and then from that point on in, you're delivering value to them, that's way more effective than we did this first phase. Now we need this other batch of information before we can complete the first phase. And I've been doing this long enough, and I have checklists. Everything's PDF fillable so that a client can go through and say, yes, I have this, answer this questions. And it's everything from what's the ownership structure? Is there a single owner? Are there multiple owners? What's the ownership percentages? And I was at a conference last year, and one advisor said, gee, I got all the way down to the end before I found out that there was a second owner. I mean, that's a rookie mistake.
Yeah.
That's something that no professional advisor should ever make. That's basic background. Yeah, so
This is all really interesting to me because in both of the examples you're talking about, whether it's the detailedness of the Excel sheet and the analysis that you were doing, or the drive to get all of the information up front, what comes to my mind is I think we sometimes avoid steps like this in our businesses because we don't want to bother people, or we think it's better to spread out the pain, and not annoy people in terms of the documents, or we are afraid to get that detailed in coaching somebody else, right? We let some of our natural instincts to not want to offend, not go in, not dive in too deep, hold us back. And we're always looking for takeaways here, in this podcast. And that, to me, that's a really basic human one of no, you win by digging in. You win by, and I love the idea of giving them one big pain point and then value, value, value on the end. It's those simple reminders to me that really move the needle for people.
so if we really consider, and this whole conversation is about scaling. So part of scaling is keeping the quality, the consistency of not only how much time it takes you to do something. And yes, there's huge variables between one client and another as far as complexity. But if there is a single person or committee or whatever that is that looks over the quality control of the information that's being presented back to the client, does it make sense? Is it delivering what we promised in the engagement letter? Or, some advisors use statement of work to encapsulate that, and it changes. But what their engagement letter says are the deliverables, are we really delivering that? And I've caught many advisors, or a handful of them under the Be Ready umbrella, delivering things that weren't in the engagement letter and omitting other things that were included in the engagement letter, and they had no idea that they had done that. So when you talk about scaling, what's your quality control look like?
Can you draw a line for me from I mean, it seems obvious, but I would rather hear you draw the line yourself, like from the efficiency, the consistency, these kind of things that you're building with your team to the client, to the client's sense of how they're being served and taken care of.
Well, one of the best examples I can give you there is what clients hate the most is silence on the part of the advisor. Like there's a lot of activity up front, a long range of silence, and then all of a
Mhm.
sudden a big range of activity, a lot of activity where the advisor's asking follow-up questions and making changes based upon new information, and it extends it. Well, what clients do like, and this is drawing the line, is I had mentioned the Gantt charts, or the engagement map, as I like to call it. Gantt charts are a little cold out there, but an engagement map, what it does is the client gets to see the engagement map. They get to see at what point the engagement is in, who's responsible as far as on our team for delivering, or analyzing or providing information to the advisor who's in charge of that engagement, call it the senior or the partner in charge of that engagement. So if the client can see the result of all of the checklists and document requests and all of the other things that go on behind the scenes, they don't get to see that. but those are what drives the engagement map. The engagement map keeps us, shall I say, responsible to the client of delivering our promise. And if the client can see, the line moving down the engagement map, that's the line you want to draw from. The client is kept informed about our
Yeah.
progress, and that engagement map is driven by all the other collateral that's been developed behind the scenes that keeps us efficient, keeps us responsible for our part of the engagement, and the rest of the team.
Well, one of the things I love about these conversations, we're just really beginning, really, but it will continue to have on the podcast, is we get to go back and forth between people who speak Excel and people who speak Word. And I'm very much, I'm on the Word side, right? I'm the creative strategist, marketing guy. I speak that language. I speak French, you speak German, whatever. But the cross pollination of that is so great because even now I'm picking up again on the value of things that maybe I would discount, like the specificity, the accountability, the detailedness of mapping out a procedure, which would be really helpful, I think, to other services and other things where it could be easy to sort of miss that. But this really is the spine that protected you as you began to scale and grow. I think there was another story you wanted to tell us about another sort of a fundamental shift in the road too, right? With the business as you brought on new partners and in that moment of scaling.
Well, that fundamental shift really starts in getting them to understand what's already been built, as opposed to reinventing the process every time.
Yeah.
Like it's one professional advisor that is under the tent, and he is an associate advisor with Be Ready. One of the first things he did when, he we made our agreement, he went out and contacted somebody who was a specialist in marketing. Now, I kind of took a little umbrage to that because I've got brand three. And
Yeah.
and so it was like,
I guess
well,
we should take some umbrage too, but we're okay. We're
okay.
okay.
So the next thing I know is I get an engagement letter from this marketing company to sign with them, and I've never spoken with them.
Oh wow.
Now, I am still, you know, the controlling owner in Be Ready.
Sure.
And for somebody to do something like that. Now, this advisor did mention to me that they had spoken to these folks, but for it to get to the point where they did not have contractual or signature authority over signing a contract that they're not financially responsible for, that's that's not partnership material, that's employee mindset. So a lot of people coming into, when you scale, one of the first questions is, what is the revenue share, as opposed to how much of a cash call will I be responsible for? So, and what can I bring to the company, that's in the emerging marketplace, which we are, and that we are trend setting within that marketplace. And so one of the big shifts I have is when somebody brings something to me, I always ask, so how are you going to pay for this? And it was, well, the company can pay for it. And I go, all right, how's the company going to pay for it? From my profits or from the company profits? So the mind shift is, if somebody wants to come in and have some equity position, they have to have not the employee mindset. They have to have the entrepreneur, that partner mindset. And so identifying that quicker and upfront is key to
Yeah.
bringing anybody on. And that was, I know I went around the bush twice on that explanation to your question, but that's really what happens, is that somebody that wants to be part of something growing that they can share in, future revenue, future profit streams,
Yeah.
then they have
That
to be,
makes a lot of sense. No, they
they have,
should be as worried about you as they should be as worried as you about how that thing's going to get paid for,
yeah,
you know?
you know,
So,
making the monthly nuts, so to speak. What does it take to keep the lights on?
yeah. This is a unique model, not everyone listening to this will be building by bringing on partners, scaling through partnership. We usually think about it, through the muscle and the effort of acquiring new clients, but this is a different way to scale and there's so much to be learned from it. Were there any other big challenges that come to mind when you think about your journey and scaling and maintaining the quality of service?
Yes, one of them was the proper messaging to other business advisors that we protect your relationship with your client that you refer over. And a lot of business advisors, even though it says it on our website, even though I mentioned that during our initial conversations of you refer us a client, we're going to protect your relationship with that client until they decide what they want to do, but we are protecting your relationship. And that kind of fell on deaf ears. And I guess I've been saying it long enough and have tweaked how I say it to the point where all of a sudden these other advisors are starting to say, it makes sense. And I'm also thinking that the awareness within the professional advisor industry, those are CPAs and money managers and financial planners and all the other professional advisors, they are now seeing the unique opportunity of partnering, collaborating with Be Ready. And I was going to say somebody like Be Ready, but there's nobody else like Be Ready out there in the marketplace now. We've been there for 10 years. All right. So there are new startups. Private equity reaches out to me twice a day, and not the same people saying, we're looking for businesses in your industry, in your vertical. Would you be open to a conversation for us to acquire Be Ready? Now, this is the first time I've said that out in the open, but that's where this industry, trying to lead the industry, keep the messaging the same, and keeping the quality of the services that we deliver the same, so that people are believing it now. And so it's almost funny for me to get these inquiries on a daily basis. you know Family partnerships are looking to invest. Do you need to grow? And right now it's no. I'm not looking for anything like that, but they see that there's a methodology with which Be Ready works. And I speak at conferences where private equity groups are represented there. So they've seen me over the past 10 years, especially over the past 6 or 8 years, where I've presented at a lot of conferences around the country, that they're starting to say, oh, that's not somebody trying to sell a different service by cloaking themselves in the business exit planning vernacular. It's really, these are people actually doing business exit planning.
And that's something that we see a lot with B2B businesses. I mean, there's nothing digital, nothing electronic, nothing in that vein of marketing can replace human connection and seeing a human with genuine passion and real care up there speaking. And you're right, people have to see it repeatedly to believe it. And it only highlights for me the need for people who own any kind of B2B service to do two things very quickly. Get clear on your message and get out there and share it wherever you can so people can meet you, because this just isn't marketing as usual. That human component has to be there. So brand three, obviously we did your brand.
Yes, you
We
did.
to us, that's the foundation of everything, is a brand strategy, which is often misunderstood. But I just like to say it's all about telling the right story to the right people. It's making sure you have a great sense of who your ideal client is, and there's enough of an understanding of who you are as a business to tell a great story that invites them into the story, that helps them discover trust and a desire to want to move on in conversation with you. That's the foundation of everything. And then what we find is that it powers marketing, of course, but also sales and client experience. It impacts everything that helps you grow and scale. So I just want to touch on those things real quick and just, I'm curious, first of all, after we worked with you, how did your sense of how you tell your story change, or how did the story itself change after working with Brand 3?
Well, Matt Christ, who was the founder of Brand 3, so I'm not going to call him Matt 1 and you Matt 2,
That's okay, we do.
but he spent a lot of time with me when we first started talking about, building out the website. And we're talking about, you know, what was the image that we wanted to show to the world? What was the messaging we wanted to consistently deliver? What was our inventory? What was the products, what we were selling? Who was our audience? And it was very early on when Matt and I were talking, and there were other folks involved at that time as well. But I said, I've done direct marketing to business owners, and it's hard, especially 8, 10 years ago. It's hard to get, if you have 20 business owners or 100 business owners in a room, you may have 5 follow up, 10 follow up, maybe a 10% follow up. And out of that 10%, you get one or two that you have a deeper dive in. And then you have a couple of successful engagements with those folks. And that's the whole repeatable process. But, and I told the story about the CFPs initially, when I got my CFP back in the 80s, they, a lot of the people who were CFPs and were selling the service didn't actually deliver it. So they would refer that out to real CFPs. There weren't many of them around. And so I recognized that dynamic was happening within the business exit planning community. And so those were the talkers, the business exit planning talkers that need business exit planning doers to actually refer the clients to. And be
Oh,
ready
that's great.
are the doers.
Yes. And how has your approach to marketing changed since you've, defined your brand better, had that strategy behind you? How did it change the way you market? Be ready.
Well, initially it was all client, business owner facing. And then I realized, other than just my personality was one that I needed to be involved. So, as some of the professional organizations I was involved with, I started volunteering. And my moniker is, show up on time and over deliver when it comes to, promoting your brand. And that's what I've done. I've done it through the IEPA, the predecessor was Pinnacle. I've done it through Growth Drive and a couple of other organizations that I've been a part of. So, relatively early on, I made the change that speaking to other advisors is way more efficient for me to get clients, because if I'm in a room with 10 advisors and they all have 5 business owners who qualify who would be a good fit to talk to me, I've got 50 hot qualified leads from
Yeah.
these 10 advisors.
Yeah. And I think what we find is that raises the stakes even higher for you to have a clear message, because that's the key to the transmissibility of what you do, right? For people to be able to tell your story, to pass on to their clients. This is the problem they solve. This is how they do it differently. This is why you should speak to them. And without that, all of that effort can really just sort of float off into the breeze. What about sales? How did your approach to sales, did it change the way you think about that much?
It did change the way I thought about sales, but For some reason, over the years as an entrepreneur, I started my own accounting firm. I've had multiple firms. I've had firms bought out. I worked for one of the top 100 CPA firms in the United States, and I was in charge of acquiring new clients. I'm confident in what I'm delivering, call it what I'm selling. So the messaging has always been, if you're not confident in delivering whatever sales pitch it is, if you're not connecting with the client and you show confidence that you can deliver, not false confidence, but a real confidence, the clients can understand that. And vis a vis, the other advisors can understand it. And I know what their pain points are. So I never,
Yeah.
things I don't do is I don't immediately start to discount anything. Our initial meetings are always, and I got this strategy from a group called the Center for Enlightened Business. And, they've morphed into different things, but it was, this is an interview process. I'm interviewing you as much as you're interviewing me. And if we're not a good fit, we're just not a good fit.
I think there's a lot to be said for that mindset in a sales conversation. I think everyone feels better cared for in that way. I just had a conversation with one of our past clients who made us an IT provider, MSP, who just made a very successful exit. And to your point about the confidence of having that clear message, the fella I was talking to there actually tracked even all the way, not only the growth of his company, but the exit itself and the negotiations for the exit and waiting for the right deal, to a confidence that he had acquired in really understanding the value of what he offered. The messaging was all tied to that, because when we developed that, we're really trying to figure out what is really unique about you and how you solve this problem in the industry. How does it stand out? And there's a real value attached to that. And the last thing I'll ask you about is client experience. I'm guessing Matt did a customer journey map with you and some other things like that. Did you explore the client experience piece with
Yes,
Brand 3?
and absolutely. And one of the things that Matt did for me is he got me to have these conversations out loud with him. Things that I knew intuitively, but have
Yeah.
never spoken. When it came for me to articulate it to him, it was surprisingly difficult. So initially, what is our brand promise? What is our deliverable? But when we started looking at the customer experience, that's one of the times where I started doing client onboarding checklists is, and the Gantt chart or the engagement map, the client experience, even if they don't get the outcome that they wanted, not because we fell down, but those are just the facts and circumstances. Like, oh, I want to sell my business for $10 million so I can retire, and their business is worth $1 million, and they can't sell it for 10, and they can't afford to walk away from it or sell it for $1 million and get 400, 4 or 500,000 net of fees and taxes. Then the client isn't getting what they want. But the experience of going through the process, their learning journey, their enlightenment journey of what it takes to build value in a company and to sell it, that's a positive experience, even though their outcome is not what they wanted. And I make that clear up front. So the client journey, which is one reason why that engagement map is so important. Without it, they don't, they might as well be locked up in the hold of a ship, that when it sets sail, they're thrown down there. And then when it lands at port, they're taken out. No, we want them to, view the stars,
That's so important. Setting expectations at the beginning of the relationship, so important. And
yes,
and it is, I think, what people don't expect. It is a byproduct of doing the brand strategy work, because you're talking about a relationship and what is the best way to make that relationship really between the business and the ideal client. There's just so much more going on than just, marketing and sourcing leads and whatever. This is about the whole journey that they're going to take with the
right.
business.
And the other
Um,
thing that I've learned as far as the client experience, I don't try to become the client's friend.
mm,
Just like I don't try, when my children were growing up, I wasn't their friend, I was their parent. I'm not my client's friend. I'm their advocate. I'm their professional advisor. So there is a bit of an arm's length relationship that we have. And I know this is just my personal approach to it, but I find that the difficult conversations are easier to have
mm,
than
mhm,
somebody saying, I thought you were my friend. It's like,
mm.
no, I took that hat off and I put my professional advisor hat on. Because
That's a really unique dial to turn and to calibrate, in the mix of all of this that I don't hear talked about a lot. That level of how much do you get? And I think that varies by industry and by service. There are some services where that turning that dial up of friendship and engagement and that personal connection could be a benefit and could work really well. But it makes a ton of sense to me that with the kind of news you often have to deliver, the guidance you have to give, that bit of distance would be invaluable. So for this section, about scaling and maintaining quality of service, I just have one last question for you in this particular conversation. If you could go back in time and find younger Anna starting this whole thing, what would you tell her? What would be the most important thing to tell her about scaling and growth and the journey ahead?
stay the course and don't have so many self doubts along the way, you would have saved a ton of energy and you would have gotten many more nights' sleep.
It's incredible to hear more about how you serve people, Anna, the heart behind it, the values that are driving it. And what really stands out to me is that you were intentional from the beginning about thinking ahead about scaling, about thinking ahead about how to maintain a great quality of service for people all along the way. We have a fun thing that we like to wrap up with because look, we believe that if you're going to market B2B services, then it has to be, it's relational. B2B services are all about relationships, they're all about trust. And so we're going to have to give people something that is a little more than information and expertise. We got to give them a glimpse of the human behind the services. So that's what we have here. This is our behind the brand questionnaire. It's a chance for anyone who might want to connect with you just to get to know you a little bit more on a human level, and it is mostly painless. And we'll go through it quickly. You up for it?
Absolutely.
All
And
right.
I could talk all afternoon about what we do at Be Ready, but I'm ready to jump into this.
Awesome.
Wonderful. We'll go through this quickly. All right, Sarah, take it away.
Yes, I'm really excited for this first question. Let me ask it and then I'll tell you why I'm excited. What is your go-to karaoke song? Or what song do you wish you could sing at karaoke?
House of the Rising Sun.
That is a good
House of the
one.
Rising Sun. Nice.
Anna, I'm going to be planning a Denver trip in the next couple of years, and I'm going to come find you, and we're going to go to karaoke night and perform House of the Rising Sun together.
I hope you like hanging out in biker bars. We're going to have fun.
I so do, as long as they have good wings, and I actually know a few like that in Denver, so.
Excellent. Okay.
Amazing. Anna, what's the last thing that made you laugh out loud?
I was watching a movie last night. It's called Unfrosted, and it was a comedy. I'd never heard of the movie before, and there were several scenes in there where a researcher got blown up, and I laughed out loud. You have to
Love it.
see the movie to appreciate it.
I'm going to add that to my list. All right, next one. What is your favorite way to get away from it all?
Play my guitar, and that can be anywhere.
That's wonderful. I like this next question. What smell reminds you of a specific place or time?
Baking bread.
What does it remind you of? What time or place? Where does it take you to?
It takes me to smells growing up, but even more so to my own kitchen where I bake my own bread. And
Mm,
that is another thing that I do. I love to cook. And if I would stand up, you say, oh, yeah, that girl loves to cook. But just the feeling of home, that baking, the smell of baking bread, just always puts me in that level spot.
All right. What is one day in your life that you would like to relive?
Boy, there's a bunch of them that I wouldn't, but I would say the first time I walked again after breaking my back,
Wow.
the light bulb just came on. Like, I never
Wow.
believed the doctors, but when I did that, it was like, I've got this. Plus, it also said that I was in the bonus round for the rest of my life. And that was over 40 years ago that happened. So I've been in the bonus round of my life the past 40 years.
What a great way to see life. That's incredible. What are 3 words that your loved ones would use to describe you?
Off color, or 3 saying, not 3 words. I would say unpredictable, loyal, and loving.
All right. Last question here. What would it mean to you to have truly succeeded? What does true success look like for you? And not necessarily in your company or in your work, but for you personally.
Well, I've got 3 more big things I want to accomplish that I'm not going to share with you. And they have nothing to do with work and, hitting money milestones. But there's 3 things that I want to accomplish. And one of them is playing piano, because I never learned how to play, but that's something I just committed to this year, plus 2 other things. So when I look at, if I were to retire today, I would have so much to do. I would not become one of these homebodies. It was, I've got so much to do. Now that I don't have to get up and go to work, there's so much I can still do.
I like it.
I would just guess that the fact that you see life from a holistic point of view, that you value things outside the business, that is probably of great value to people who are thinking about their exit plan. If folks want to reach out to you, we have bereadyexits.com. It's all one word, bereadyexits.com. Folks can find you there, learn more about the services. Anna, thank you so much for your time today, for the insights, the stories, and the heart that you've shared with us. We just can't thank you enough. This has been Matt Wolf and Sarah Padisal for the CEO's Heart for Service, hosted by Brand 3, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining our conversation on how to scale a business without losing its heart. If you found this episode helpful, here are 3 quick ways you can support our podcast and share it with others. First, subscribe to the show here on this platform. Second, leave a review in your podcast app. Your feedback helps other leaders with a heart for service to find this community. Third, share this episode with a B2B leader who's trying to scale their business without compromising the quality of their services. The CEO's Heart for Service is a production of Brand 3. If you're a B2B service provider who delivers exceptional service, but struggles to get your marketing to connect with the right people, find us at brand3.net. And sign up for our Brand 3 newsletter that only sends marketing insights worthy of your inbox. Genuinely helpful stuff for the road ahead. The CEO's Heart for Service is also supported by Forge Podcast Company, a turnkey production solution for using podcasts to reach a wider audience, win new clients, and grow. Find them at forgepodcast.co.